Welcome to the research seminar co-organized by CPC Center for Pedagogic Research and QESS Blended Learning Project. I would like to welcome all of you who are joining us on site or via Zoom today. We are very honored to have Professor KK Chan today to share with her experience on research opportunities and knowledge transfer on the changing learning landscape for a better new normal. Professor Chan is Professor of Practice in the Faculty of Education, the University of Hong Kong. She has served as Deputy Secretary and Principal Assistant Secretary in the Education Bureau, Hong Kong SAR. In her current position, she is aspiring to advancing education development by using and conceptualizing the valuable experiences, enriching theories and the teaching profession, informing and catalyzing research, and enabling knowledge sharing and transfer beyond boundaries. She also serves as consultant in various international projects and editor for the Curriculum Journal. Please take a look at today's rundown. After Professor Chan's presentation, we'll have a group discussion on-site and with Zoom breakout rooms, followed by a plenary session. Towards the end, we'll have a Q&A session. For those attending via Zoom, you would like to type your questions through the chat box anytime during the talk and will be addressed. So next, may I please invite Dr. Elsa Tong, Director of CPCE CPR, to present a souvenir to Professor Chan on behalf of Center. Would you please come forward to the stage, and we would like to have a photo with you and Professor Chan. Professor Chan, please.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tong and Professor Chan. Would you please remain on stage? Sorry. And for colleagues who are joining us here on site, may I please ask everyone come forward for a group photo. We would also like to take group photos with colleagues and guests on Zoom in the next picture. So would you please come forward for a bit? Thank you.
V shape 咁樣。
係啊，喺前邊，佢呢個前邊，係啦，喺前邊。喺度。OK，啱啱好。
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So please, everybody be seated. Thank you. Now, I would like to ask all of our guests on Zoom, would you please have your cameras ready? And we'll take a picture together. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, smile. One more time. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Thanks so much for bringing us a good smile. Thank you. So without further ado, would you please join in welcoming our keynote speaker, Professor KK Chan, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Eric, Esther. Good afternoon, Esther, Eric, Jason, and lots of friends for attending this seminar. I'm very honored to be invited, but I have to tell you that when Eric first approached me, I have discussed with him, and also Esther later, to make sure that I'm the right person to give this talk. The reason is I've been a policymaker for some years after leaving my work as associate professor in the University of Hong Kong in the 90s. It's a long time ago. And then I'm rejoining the university as a professor of practice. And then I asked Esther and Eric, what do you want to achieve, or what can I help you to achieve? And then after several dialogues or discussion, and then I found that maybe my self-introduction, my experiences, moving from one post to another, and my career led paths, and the way I choose my career, right, and the changes may help you actually to find or navigate your own research pathways or career pathways. As I understand, you're all young, promising, right, full of energy, and full of potentials. And the way I see the research landscape or the learning landscape and education landscape in Hong Kong now is actually so broad that whatever you do, almost, I can say that, can contribute to education. But of course, as Esther have mentioned earlier, the pedagogical center has been set up on the one hand to focus on helping colleagues to focus on tertiary teaching or contributing to teaching and learning in schools. But at the same time, you can also pursue your research development in your area or specialism. So I'm expecting, or I'm doing it, as I understand, there's a diversity of needs in this seminar. So I try to cater to your needs. And I have prepared a PowerPoint, right? And then I promise that I will give you the PowerPoint later. And I just make sure that when you receive, the version you receive is actually accurate. This is what academics do. We make sure that everything we said and also everything we share is accurate. So it's actually more a sharing session than just advising or whatever, or pointing the directions. So although the time is set for 45 minutes for this talk, I try to be faster so that there's more time for the Q&A first before actually we move on to the workshops. For the workshops, as I understand, all right, you may have a lot of questions, you may have a lot of ideas to do. The workshop will be a kind of taster of the thinking process. Maybe you have thought about those questions for a long time or already have your ideas in mind, but see if those questions and the PowerPoint or the sharing can help you more or maybe give you more, maybe beyond. That is partly my experience, all right? So I started by explaining, sharing with you my research experience as a young researcher, all right, almost 30 years ago. All right, I started as a geography teacher, actually. Right, that was the only job I looked for at that time, right? And then, of course, at that time, parents, this is not the job they expected me to do. But anyway, I chose it, a teaching career. And then very soon, all right, I think I taught quite well, right? So I'm invited or I'm recruited as a government school inspector. And then again, very soon, and then I'm recruited to the university as a lecturer. At that time, a lecturer, we don't have titles like associate professor. It's a prestige system. But very soon, the RAE exercise is introduced to universities in order to upgrade to, this is the Rose Garden, right? The government was expanding the number of universities. And then we are invited to retitle to either assistant professor or associate professor, based on your research experience. I have to say that I was very lucky, also partly because of my interest. I'm very open. I think I was very open-minded. I started my specialism, I would say. My specialism at that time is curriculum studies. That was also the specialism that I work on in the government several years later. But at that time, we don't have to get a PhD, right, to get a lecturer post. But very soon, because I'm quite exposed to all kinds of ideas, and then also because I was teaching curriculum studies because of my experience in curriculum development in the governments as an inspector before. So that I'm the only one at that time, a lecturer with a government work background, because they think that they need someone. All right, I start choosing my PhD there. I think the way I choose my PhD and complete my PhD could be quite similar to what you are trying to do. Although I know that you got PhD or whatever, postgrad qualifications already. I started with a very simple question, a curriculum decision made jointly by the universities at that time about admission of A-level student at that time. It was A-level students, whether they would take liberal studies as an example or not. So a lot of people thought that I'm the one who invented liberal studies, but it is not. Liberal studies is not so-called invented by me, but I started researching on the decision. I have not thought of what caused that decision of not making it a core subject. So I asked the people involved, I asked the school and so on. So remember that it was 30 or 30 years ago, all right? The literature was very limited, all right? And then the research atmosphere was not that strong at that time, but I started exploring that. To make it short, the outcome of my study is not a topic in curriculum studies. It ended up, the notion I used to conceptualize the changes is the governance. And then I actually resorted to literature in both the philosophy of education, including curriculum, all right, organization studies, and also some organizational studies and some political sciences. So you see what I mean. That is, when as you research, because it's evidence-based, as you know more and more, you try to make sense of it. What theories are able to contribute to it? But of course, you will say that, oh, this is qualitative research, it is not quantitative. But quantitative and qualitative research can be interacting. I also read, literature on quantitative research. So what the last bit about my PhD is that the literature that I eventually used for my thesis, I think was only about maybe 1/3 of what I studied. So you understand what I mean. So in your research process, if you really want to study something, all right, this is one way that you explore. You explore the universe and then to try to find the explanation. On the other hand, now I'm back to university, all right, and then I find it different. Maybe what I see in the university is actually what you are now facing. It's more competitive, definitely. More high standard, right? The paper, the publication, more high standard. My colleagues, some of my colleagues are more focused. They are definitely more productive, right? They can write on the same topic, many articles, all right? And then they're just producing papers. It's not difficult if you have a topic that that is very popular in different places. I also I end up actually now teaching curriculum studies, comparative education, and also policies, or policy studies. So your research career, what I want to say is that your professional academic career may change along with your interests, and of course with your achievement, achievement, of course, and also your aspirations. Whether you would like to have a not fast track, a smooth track, a one-way track, where we need people to do it in a one-way track in order to specialize and to lead, maybe, all right. But you also need people who move around. So my experience of changing my job every time, all right, when I'm given the opportunity, is that the experience of one job is actually carried to another. That is, first, practitioners, then research, research back to practitioner, now back to research. Although I'm a professor of practice, I'm also an active, I'm classified as an active researcher. I'm still collaborating, but the kind of research we are now doing is more, I would put it this way. I'm inclined to the interdisciplinary one, and also I choose my work. All right, I choose those that have potential for knowledge transfer, because my time is limited. I mean, my energy is limited, and up to this stage, I would rather, do things that have impact on stakeholders. So this most probably is a description of a researcher. Of course, some become international, well-known, and so on and so forth. So I would encourage you, that is my advice, is that try to be open-minded about your research career, or teaching and research career. All right, now going back to this one. So you have some ideas why I have to share with you all these. All right, so I think that this is the purpose of the workshop. And then I also make sure that my broad views, all right, of the education landscape would also help you. And you see, for better learning education in the new normal, I think this is actually already in the new normal, so we're all facing this one. So then we go to the workshop. I finished the self-introduction, all right. I briefly introduced what I see as the landscape, whether you're working in higher education and school education. The perspectives are actually the disciplines, all right, the academic disciplines, all right, there's multiple, and what are the research opportunities as I see, all right, or as you see, you can actually add to that. So I make sure I have time. And then what are effective strategies for knowledge transfer? And recently, the one that I joined or helped got a prize, an award in our faculty. All right. So it's a workshop, we'll go back. All right, this is the landscape. I had delivered quite several talks on education landscape in Hong Kong. Every time, of course, it's changing, but I try to show the possibilities of the landscape. Look at the possibilities. This is a very beautiful Hong Kong, all right, the harbor. So it's a kind of symbolic, what you see the landscape. What is this? Big elephant, right? Would you like to see an elephant with jigsaw puzzles? And then where are you? All right, you have one jigsaw puzzle, or you work with several jigsaw puzzles. Beautiful garden with a path, all right, rocky road leading maybe to the mountains, to the forest, the wood. All right, this one, all right, is also symbolic. A very old, traditional, I think, Chinese boat, and then against the very modernized harbor and the buildings. And then, of course, this is very obvious, the Big Bay area. Now, the Big Bay area is not only the Big Bay area in southern part of China. At one point of time, I don't know whether
it is happening or is going to happen, or because of the COVID-19, we approached, all right, to join a research institute or research involving the world's biggest Bay Area. What are the similarities? Of course, it's very visionary, it's very futuristic, but the future is now. So these are the possibilities of the landscape that you see. If you ask me, I would say that myself, all right, I would see that it's here from the traditional to the modern, or the contemporary, or to the future. Some of the questions, some of the issues sometimes we face, we talk about it at lunch. And then because changes in education is very slow, well, actually it's very fast, slow in the sense that because how many years of active working in our active working age, it could be 40 years. And then our education experience is also very long, right? And then in the next picture, you understand why I say so. It's slow. It's fast and slow, both. All right. Now, what I've just described is that some of you, all right, there's no good or bad. All right. It all depends on your interest. Some of you will look at very specific, you study things very detailed. All right. Like languages, we talk about language across the curriculum. We talk about very specific pedagogy. I'm sure because of the COVID-19, new pedagogical approaches, techniques, adaptations, innovation have emerged. And then some have proved more productive, more effective than the normal, but some not. Some not. Some you may like to go back to the normal. On the other hand, look ahead, or look, think broad, and then the telescope. If you're too immersed, all right, occupied with very micro, start looking at the telescope of what you can see. And then this is just a very popular diagram we use for comparative research. For comparative education, this very famous diagram. That is, if you're talking about regions, places, and so on, or comparing, all right, this kind of cube may help you locate yourself. You can locate yourself at the world level. At lunch, we also talk about international organization publishing, all right, worldwide responses to COVID-19. How representative are they? All right, why they can collect data so fast? Who give them the data? Or whether there's a globalization taking place and so on. I just try to give examples of what we are actually experiencing. I think as a researcher, we first need to know where we are. All right, before you choose your focus, or before you locate your focus. All right, now I'll give you one more example, then you understand why I said sometimes you find that you are in a kind of tensions. The other day I said, all right, the other day I gave very similar talk to a group of young people from an NGO who are going to mentor teachers. Going to mentor students. And then they are caught between people telling them the education system is very worse. In Hong Kong, all right? They are coached, all right? They attend induction courses. People keep telling them that it's very bad. But on the other hand, I also ask them, what are your experiences? I ask them two questions. What people have told them, or what is the general perception and their experiences? There are quite a discrepancy. Why is it? Take a look at the next. First of all, this is also my experience when I joined the government. People not in the education sector tell me that this is almost the most difficult policy area. because in other policy areas, they are working with maybe engineers in transport and housing. All right, maybe they are working with medical doctors. But in education, what they said is that everyone is a stakeholder. We don't know who we are going to listen to. Even my parents, even your friends is a stakeholder. Although we know that students should be our greatest stakeholder. Right? Students are the greatest stakeholder. So people see different sides of it. And then the latest one, particularly regarding research in teaching and learning, is that the sciences of research, right, in learning and teaching have changed a lot. All right. In the past, we were based on empirical science, look at brain science, all right, lots of sciences. Sometimes people think that, oh, all students should memorize, or just go to the other extreme, all right? But this is not the way every student learns. So we need to know enough of how students learn in order to learn better. That is going back to the title of this seminar, that is a better new normal. A better new normal is not necessarily back to the normal, it's a better new normal. All right, we emphasize the word better. But of course, the answers are still open. So I just want to show you why, we are actually quite in a difficult position. Now, this is just a recollection of the aims of education. Earlier, we also talked about my colleagues like to contribute to policies. Yes, this is very good. Actually, I think with a purpose in mind, eventually, your study can contribute to policy. But first of all, you have to know what the policy is. All right, this is the aims of education. It hasn't changed. It has been there since the year 2000. I think most probably because it is so visionary at that time. Just two keywords. One is whole person development, all around. At that time, it's translated into all-round development, 全人发展. The other one is lifelong learning. I also put the references here. Actually, we are not the only system using these. Actually, in year 2000, I think for some of you who are very aware of the reforms, all the major systems around the world are actually making reference to all these important publications and also maybe making similar reforms. But if you take a look at the two key vision, one is lifelong learning. Of course, it comes from UNESCO. I think this is a great book that a lot of systems have referred to. So the other one, we have some consultants or academics working with us at that time. Of course, the Hong Kong government is also a consultative government. That is, we try to consult both local and overseas. And one obviously overseas consultant asked me, he said, we don't have all-round development in our system. Now, you try to read what he's trying to say behind, or I'm not going to answer this question. Then my answer was, it is our Chinese, culture of education all the centuries, because it's followed by Duk Zhi Tai Kun Mei. Although these match with the, you can say, maybe the knowledge dimensions or the dimensions of development. But anyway, it's a mixture, all right? Without having to say that it is Eastern or without having to say that this is the Western. All right, just because we think that these are. So we end up, of course, with restructuring the 334, getting rid of the school cert, A-level, all right, combining two examination in the Hong Kong DSE. We have now a complete, what we call architecture. I deliberately emphasize no dead end, because in the old system, if you can't go to sixth form, all right, after school certificate examination, most probably half of the students actually have to leave the system and cannot come back. Most of it, they cannot come back unless they work very hard. They go to the so-called evening school, all right, and then it's not easy. It's not easy to get to A level and then to the 3-year program. Now you can come in, you can go out, you have the QF and so on. So this is a system with no dead end. So this is where we are. No student deprived of education opportunities. The reason I raise this because I learned that some of you may be in counseling. You may be doing positive education, mentoring, and so on. That is the students' well-being. I think I have to reiterate this because a lot of people, I won't say that because of the older generation, that is going back to that diagram I showed. Everyone is a stakeholder, where some stakeholders are in their own, era. I don't know what is an era, not, they are still, having this perception or knowledge, so-called knowledge or experience that this system will fail you. But this system, I don't think this system is now meant to fail you. This system is trying to recognize everybody or its potential. All right, of course, it takes time, but anyway, just want to show you. The other piece of information, Hong Kong, whether you like it or not, actually it's good news. People, we need more good news, all right? But of course, this good news has become a little old, but it is still there, all right? It is still valid. That is, no matter we are on top or we are dropping in PISA, the performance of Hong Kong students or the whole system have shown that is one of the most equitable system in the world. All right, we have been the first most equitable before, and then in the last round, Macau become the first equitable. All right, Hong Kong is still the second, and Macau is there. Macau is down there. That means that the performance of our students is not related to whether they come from rich families or poor families or not. That is, we have a system that enables students, irrespective of their abilities, of their home background or socioeconomic background, they can do well. So more publications about how students learn, how people learn. I think these are very basic. In what I understand is that in post-ed program around the world, I think China have translated this one year 2000, I think in many languages. I mean, the world or systems. And then the second one is 2019. These almost become a must. When I was in the government, it is also a compulsory reading for them. Although I know in the government, they don't have this practice, but I made it a practice for my colleagues. All right, so now this is a diagram extracted from the internet, just for the sake of convenience. What I want to say is that learning particular, I think for your programs, I'm sure that they actually have even more potential than very pure academic programs. When you involve a lot of intelligence, all right, and so on. And then Jason has left, all right. So ask Jason for everything here, for all the help needed. And then this one is about student development behavior, very famous psychology theory, all right, which is still valid, but keep updated. All right, now, I just want to highlight very quickly what the paradigm shift. I'm sure you understand what these paradigm shifts are. So where are we? We were just talking, all right, oh, Hong Kong is still very examination oriented. On the other hand, I said, we have changed, but the change is slow. There are things that we change faster. There are changes that we change slower. So of course, mirror is a word that is very popular. So I cannot avoid using this word. So what is mirror? All right. But this mirror is pretty permanent. Permanent is that it's still there. I mean, the tensions. So I just try to say a few, all right. We're still struggling between knowledge transmission, knowledge creation. All right, this is the greatest struggle. That's why it is different color, right? It's the most difficult part, changing assessment or examination, assessment of learning for learning and as learning. I think we're pretty well here. I think we know, we all accept that no uniformity, more diversity, flexibility. Well, yes and no competition. I think that's a culture difference here. Some people think that competition is not good. In a recent research that I am working with other colleagues, it shows that both work together in Hong Kong. It shows that Hong Kong is balancing. That's why it's keep balancing. So this is where we are. Of course, to different degree, maybe stronger tensions at certain level of education, or maybe less tension. Most probably at tertiary level, that is post-secondary university, because your intellectuals, maybe you're more well-read and so on. You accept this more readily, maybe than some stakeholders. So this is where we are. I think you're all very familiar with this. These are all you can read, so I don't have to go over them. I would better just try to draw your attention just in case, all right? We talk about orientation. So I think SPEED or CPCE are well placed to see the different orientations of program right here. Whereas in some universities, purely academic, but even my student, my colleagues are thinking, oh, why can't we have a mixed orientation in our program? What kind of orientation, academic, professional, vocational? And that's why the government is now having bachelor vocational degrees, I think. Yeah, a few universities are offering that for the first time, right, this year. Okay, this is the UNESCO classification. But of course, the most recent classification is 2011. But it's useful to take a look at that. They also have a classification of the fields of training. That's how they classify the professions. But just a kind of need to know. All right, these are the knowledge skills for school reform. All right, these are the values. All right, apart from the priority values, national identity and empathy. Actually, we have a system of values, just like language. It's the values across the curriculum. If I'm teaching geography and I'm teaching humanities, then the curriculum of geography or humanities will incorporate the values relevant to the context. You follow what I say? Same for, say, applied learning. I know that some of your programs may admit our students taking applied learning. There are also relevant values in applied learning. The same generic skills, interpersonal skills, entrepreneurship. There's a component of entrepreneurship there. So this is the kind of backdrop of what we call, the framework. Okay, assessment is the most difficult one. All right, just to make sure that we are aware of the tensions. All right, in schools we call them the other learning experiences. All right, in universities, more well known as the experiential learning, and so on and so forth. So these are the changes. So these are what I called earlier the interdisciplinary perspectives. All right, you can have a philosophical approach, a psychological approach, if you're studying them. All right. Of course, because this diagram is taken from one of my courses. Of course, I put curriculum decisions in the center, but you can change. You can change whatever decisions there, to fit your study, and then choose a perspective or choose your research partners. You follow us? So you can choose your research partner. And then I showed this once before, and then one participant asked me, in my experience as a policymaker, all right, making decisions and then implementing reform for so many years, which one I think is most important? Apart from philosophical, that is the purpose. Of course, we start with purpose. We say all education, all right, decisions or initiatives start with a purpose. And then, of course, behind the philosophy or what sometimes people call ideology or conceptions of the curriculum. It can be academic, it can be child-centered, all those jargons, all right, or all those classifications. Apart from that, well, people will have different answers. But because of my experience, I would think that organizational would be important, because you need people, you need processes, you need resources, you need the necessary conditions and removal of barriers, right? So of course, the psychological, but just to share with you, maybe this has changed over time. So some references that I also use, for instance, any paper on interdisciplinary research, that's one. Any paper on making framework, all right, or involving social, cognitive, emotional engagement, so on and so forth. But anyway, all right, the last part, all right, then we can have Q&A. Then what are the changing context? I'm sure that you are aware of all these. I'm not going to go into detail, all right? The digital, the economic opportunities, the Belt and Road, the COVID-19, all these are, all right? I go into what I have been working with colleagues since COVID-19, all right? These have gone into a paper which will be published soon, right? But those conceptualizations, I think, are not, how to put it, it's more and more visible, I would think that. Well, I deliberately write about things that people don't write. There are feasible things like e-learning, blended learning, right? Those that people write about. I try to write about things that people may not see, but important. So the first one is that, well, we're saying that I'm not familiar with, apart from my university, I'm sorry, I'm not too familiar with how the other universities cope with the COVID-19, but I ask a lot about what happens in schools. This is very impressive. Visual arts teachers, all right? Our perception of visual arts teachers is that they teach a lot of skills of drawing. Now, this teacher told me a lot of surprises. I think it's not deliberate, just because he could not send all those materials for drawing to the student, but still asking the students to do something at home. So students just pick anything that we think is a rubbish in the kitchen, just any or waste materials, all right? Make a picture, make an art. So this is quite to his surprise. Take a photo, all right? Take a photo, and then you find that, oh, this is so interesting. So this is some I cut short the PowerPoint a lot. So only one example. This is another one. You would like to attend to students' well-being. You heard of the positive psychology, all right? This school actually is a very caring school. It takes part in different projects. And then one of the colleagues there, I think is in, with some training in counseling. So she had used the idea of flow, right? And then to help students to reduce the anxiety and depression of social and physical isolation by encouraging them just to do anything, all right, they're interested in. Then you take a look at the list. So many things that students can do. Even one, because I'm not good in English, so I just want to learn my English well. All right, I think it's same for adults. I think a lot of my friends were doing things that they have not thought before. All right, so engage students. Another one, this is from other school, all right, with a lot of non-Chinese students. So the first one is unleashing. So if you're talking about research opportunities, there are lots of learning potentials and learning happening outside that we don't know. So how to tap those experiences, this is one, or maybe in tertiary institutions. The second one, now, this is deliberate, All right, the stages of changes. On the left-hand side is the one that this project, high performing system project, exactly the project that I'm working on with 3 colleagues. All right, we have presented in a conference about what we observed. And then now in 2021, schools are telling us no schools practically are staying at stage 1 and 2. In other words, they have grown, accelerating our partnership. On the right-hand side, this is just taken from the internet because I haven't studied the changes of university, but it seemed to be quite sensible. All right, universities react firstly with some different approaches, and then they face realities like my university, and then the rebound will continue to grow. I think a dip, sometimes we call it a dip. In reform literature, we call it a kind of dip. You usually have a dip and then you rise again. So this is from a school, a very experienced teacher, very good at e-learning. He conceptualized this. Of course, we've added something there, all right? With regard to, so we'll put together, reframe some of the, and then take a look at this one. Now schools are thinking, what should they do in the new semester? They have seen the benefits of half-day schooling. Again, in the past, they don't like it because, you know, they want to have more time in schools. All right, therefore, our bisessional primary schooling is changing to whole day. But now with technology, they find that if I focus the teaching on the academic subjects in the morning, there are a lot of things that schools can do in the afternoon, including mentoring, counseling, experiential learning, all kinds of interest groups, and so on and so forth. So the landscape is going to change, and then how to change, whether there's a flexibility to change. So next one. Now this is from my colleague Nancy Law's study. Well, I think this one is a fast and then pretty detailed on what's happening during the class suspension, right? You can see what works better, what doesn't work that well. And I think I'll leave it to you. But definitely it's the biggest finding at the early stage. And of course, it is expected that is the digital divide, the social divide. And but of course, our society, the government responded very quickly to the digital divide, but perhaps less to the social and emotional well-being issue. Most probably, if you ask me or ask some educators, the greatest concern most probably is that, of course, compounded by other factors, not only because of the COVID-19 or social distance. And a lot of active participation. This is Hong Kong, all right? The non-public sector are very responsive. Earlier, we talked about the foundation, the charities, there are many. And in Nancy's study reflects very similar culture. We still have this Chinese culture showing the parents very engaged in the work, in the study, even when students are staying at home, particularly primary students. So what is good parenting? It doesn't mean that more engagement is good, all right, at secondary level. So you can read this one. And some schools having non-Chinese speaking students have to work harder last year because some of the students have gone home and then cannot come back. So we have something, what we call culturally responsive strategies in terms of teaching and learning and other, all right, student support or family support or collaboration, what we call the border landscape. I think a concept originally used in visual in the visual studies, in geography and so on. So we borrow this concept. So this is OECD's kind of portrait of future of schooling. You can see some changes fit into some of them. All right, so this is a changing landscape, just a very quick snapshot of the changes, the tension, the paradigm shift, the emerging changes in learning and where they learn. If you take a look at the OECD's 4 scenarios, right? The first one, schooling extended, means we reinforce what it's doing in schools, right? Do it better. Last year, interestingly, a lot of the professional training courses for teachers are coming from the vendors. Microsoft, sometimes free, not even charged, and then some places actually have to take students away because of the COVID-19. I mean, other systems. So, of course, Ford may not occur in Hong Kong because our schooling system is pretty still well established. But where the parents will take away, the children and so on. So, self-learning, a lot of self-learning. So now here are the research opportunities. So it will be finishing very quickly. Going back, this community, I would say that this is a sharing platform for professional and research community here. Here we are all members of this community. So what are the research opportunities to you? Ultimately, of course, is your choice. I don't know whether this choice is only your own choice, or your choice you discuss with your boss, or your choice maybe with your families. But well, of course, it's not a one-off decision when I say a choice. Whether you like to go for the basic research, I actually advise some of my students on their future aspirations. Some may like to be a professor. All right, I have to actually ask them why you like to be a professor. Here it means a research professor, not just a professor just standing here. Are you sure? I tell you my experience when I joined the university. In the university in the 90s, I asked my classmates, I told Esther, do you have any advice for me? All right, I'm joining the university because he's joined. He said, it is very lonely. And then I would advise students with really high caliber to go along this one, because it's not easy. Not because it is easy, because it's not easy, therefore you have to go for it if you have the caliber. But of course, we advise gently for those who may find it difficult, right, to go the other track. The second one, applied research. There are a lot of opportunities there if you want to make impact on practice. I'm sure you know the differences. Some like to do evaluation research. Sometimes, government or even commercial firms invite consultancies. There are different consultancy tasks. Some is to study, to explore, some is to evaluate. And then some study, have a more potential, like the eCitizen 360 that I mentioned that Nancy conducting. We actually targeted the questions at what can be used. I mean, that is the data, the outcomes can be used by schools. Because ultimately the questionnaire involves a trade-off, because there's so many questions that you want to ask, all right, then the trade-off. So it's very targeted. Would it help school leadership? Would it help school management? Would it help the learning management system? And so on and so forth. So this is one, you have to decide the kind of purpose. Research opportunities, all right, we're not short of funding. We just talked about the public policy research fund. All right, some like to contribute to public policy. Bear in mind that they will be reviewed by the policymakers as well. So you have to state why it is relevant to policy. If you don't mention any relevant policy, I don't think that you're choosing the right funding source. There's one more that I think sometimes people have neglected. Are you aware of the Professional Services Advancement Support Scheme? Are you aware of this? This one is actually set up in response to the Belt and Road. Although you haven't spelled out that clear, it's in the text. All right. But interestingly, although it has not mentioned education, so-called education, but because your institution, all right, have specialism or have expertise in different things that can contribute to the Belt and Road. So you try to take a look at this one. And also the ITF, I'm sure you know, the ITF, right? So language, yes, Scholar Fund, right? The QEF, yeah, there's so many. And then a colleague asked me whether it's worth applying for those EDB funding, not the UGC, all right? The EDB funding, in my experience, in my experience working with others, and also as funder in the government, it is actually worth doing because it's pretty generous and less demanding on the intellectual rigor. So you can get the resources to give you the early success, I would say, the early success of publication. So you don't feel that every time you apply for the competitive bid, you fail. Yes, I think I really think so. I have seen, really successful researchers who started their career with, quite substantial sum of QEF and also Scholar. All right, transfer. All right, I'm just a little bit lazy. I just cut what is on Hong Kong Youth website. So there's a range of KE activities. Right. So what is meant by knowledge exchange? All right. For mutual benefit, you have the research. You can help business, government, accessible knowledge to enhance blah, 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 well-being. It's a two-way process, right? It can be arts, humanities, because I think people most probably think that it's only commerce and technology. What activities? We have a lot. Lectures, media. Now, although I know universities are very competitive institutions, and then they even compete the coverage in media. Have you heard of it? They compete for coverage. No, Eric has not heard of it. I think it's the substance. What you want the media to report is not only the coverage. So our press release is very carefully crafted in a way that the media would find it important to report for you. I think this is my experience. This is experience that I carry from the government to the university. And of course, lectures and so on, going to schools. So most probably these are what I have shared with you, or what I want to share with you, and thanks for your time. All right, questions are welcome now. So over to you, questions. Yes,
Thank
Eric?
you, Professor Chen, for the inspirational sharing. And also allow me to ask everyone to give some warm hands to Professor Chen again. So if you've got any questions from the floor, would you please raise it now? or friends and colleagues on Zoom, if you'd like to ask a question, you would like to type in the chat box and we'll address your questions very quickly. Okay, so anytime.
Seminar. You mentioned about your working in teams with other collaborators. So would you more about the experience of working with local colleagues and also international researchers and scholars? And maybe this question first.
I think having leaders who are very generous in their time and also in involving young colleagues is very important. I have this benefit when I started my career in the university, and then I can see most of those young researchers taking part in the projects have become successful researchers, or in one way or another, or become policymaker. And now what I see is, again, we are now, like me, all right, I don't need the publication myself, but I can also, people like me, that's why it's not only me, all right? It's not the person. People at this level or in this category may be approached, like what you said, by international researchers for collaboration. What I tend to do is that I would be the bridge, and then I will let others take it up. Yeah. By finding the right person, of course. Yeah, sorry, I missed the last question.
Because you mentioned a lot about knowledge transfer for us. And then what I'm thinking about, because you mentioned that in order to capture the social emotional well-being in education, then we see from your resources, you highlight parents, school teachers, policymakers, and experienced teachers. So how to find some common keys to unlock their gaps? Maybe different stakeholders may have different concerns, and then they have limited resources sometimes for families, like they have the social equity issues. So what would be one or two suggestions for us if we are a researcher, we try to design a project, what would be appropriate to include most of the voices?
Okay,
yeah, thank you.
Okay, I think my work, all right, is actually moving towards this area, because I think there's enough on curriculum study, there's enough on policy level. This is a gap, all right? Of course, we don't want to have a deficit model saying that it's a gap, but we can also think in terms of better well-being. So how to find the right project, all right, for it. Firstly, actually, it's also in the workshop. Just very quick response. Identify the situation most appropriately. The finding, even with just very general surveys, findings that are available, 小童群益會, or Nancy 360, and so on, there are some. Or even some teacher association, like the Hong Kong Career Master and Fudo Gaosi Hipui. I think those are, in one way or another, you can piece them together, just like literature review. I think in one way or another, you know, the problems are there. And then the problems are also aggravating. Second, how to pitch, all right, or position your project. So you have to decide, like what I said, you want a basic research or applied research. And then basic research is pretty slow. But I think from data collection, publishing, eventually you have to publish. There's no point just collecting the data. For applied research, I use Nancy's project as an example. There's a huge amount of data. If you just release them in one go, all right, the public or schools cannot digest because they involve a lot of stakeholders. We actually stagger the release of the findings according, now this is very important, according to the schedule or yearly cycle of the school. Now, this is a very important tips for working with schools. You don't stretch it to your own convenience. You schedule everything according to the work cycle of the school in advance. All right, say if you want to help them with planning, their planning cycle start in June, not in September. So don't plan to go to school in September. They would not have time. They would not have time to entertain you. So you approach schools in April or even earlier. I think this is just one example. Thank you. Any more? How about the workshop? Now I can introduce the workshop questions. Yes.
Yes, I think it's a good idea that we move forward
Good.
to the second part, and we will have you take charge.
Yes. Okay. Going back to the PowerPoint.
And I think as we are beginning our second session, we will also have some breakout rooms. So the guests on Zoom will be assigned to different breakout rooms, and we can form groups here, given our very cozy size here, and we can form small groups.
I'll just explain the questions very quickly. As I said, this is a taster. Right, so don't worry if you don't have any answers. Just go over the process. I do the same for my students. I think a policy planning session, right? You cannot, come up with a very detailed, a very watertight, what I call watertight, or a plan in a very short period of time. But go through the thinking process and then thinking back and forth. So firstly, of course, yourself, what you are good at, what you think you would be good at as well. You may not be good at it now, but you can be good at it later. Whether you're a novice, you're young, you're a mature researcher, and then your choice will be different. Like me, you asked me a very good question. I don't need to lead the project, but I can help people lead the project. So you at different stages, maybe early stage, you aim at publishing, because if you publish, you can get more funding. You have good track record. All right, so you can partner with someone. And then if you have a good leader, you work with a good leader. A good leader should give you opportunities to be the first author. Yeah. So what do you want to aspire to? All right. How may different or emerging opportunities that I mentioned in the PowerPoint will be relevant to what you're working? Or are they entirely new? I do have students who started with an interest, or I say in Chinese language. And then because of the classes, and then she may change her dissertation entirely within a short period of time. But of course, you need to have the confidence. And I also need to have confidence in her to switch it. All right. So whether you're inspired by the changing landscape. Why is it significant? Why do you think it's significant? What research method you think? Because some may not be practicable, like classroom observations. I think my student cannot, but then why can't you do it on blended learning? You can still do the same. You have to shift, you have to change the method. And then even for counseling, I'm helping an NGO on mentoring. Mentoring students. And then at first they thought, oh, we cannot do it. But now they find that they have new practices and then they work. So funding opportunities, all right, you have to know but I know that every colleague will be given some seed funding. Like what I said, if the competitive bid, the RGC or what is difficult, then try the easier one first, and then other considerations. So these are the questions you try to respond to during the workshop session. Eric, I'd like to ask you, Yeah, when we come to the plenary, are you inviting them to share, or everyone has to share, or what?
I think we can do it by invitation or by volunteering.
Volunteering,
Who would
yeah.
like to share their experiences or so on and so on, feel free. And if you'd like to ask further questions to Professor Chen, you can still type your questions on the Dropbox. And by the way, before we move forward to the workshop and go into the breakout rooms, the guests on Zoom, maybe you would like to screen cap the questions first.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Or we could copy and pasting the, let me do it.
Yeah.
Copy and pasting the messages or the questions to the chat room right now. I think we're good now. Welcome back to our workshop. And I guess you have already come up with some good ideas regarding the workshop questions raised by Professor Chan. And I guess, how many rooms have we got for the Zoom? So we've got 4 active rooms. Perhaps we would like to ask the participants on site first, so that the guys in the breakout rooms can have some rough pictures of what we're going to say. What about like Phoebe's room? So what have you come up so far regarding the 4 questions? So I'll pass the mic to you.
Actually, we have covered so much, but we try to summarize in 3 points. The first point is we believe that, for example, like some disciplinary practice in chemistry, there are great potential to design some pedagogical practice and software to arouse our students' interest in creating better understanding of relating their disciplinary competence, values, and identities to sustainability of the world, like the environmentally friendly practice at home, how they use chemistry understanding and health study understanding to connect to their future career paths, and also the understanding of their subject disciplinary areas knowledge. And the second thing we have discussed will be related to artificial intelligence, how we apply this to disciplinary embodiments like phonology, how to support engineering students with the support from some videos or some mobile phone application, how we help them to present with better lexical grammatical resources and understand their phonology requirement or realization in a more efficient way. And finally, we believe that we still have to welcome the challenges and potentials to teachers and educators, because we believe that we don't just need corrective feedback for our students, we also want them to have emotional fulfillment with us, and that is the potential for us to design some research to work on emotion labor and help our students to feel fulfilled throughout their higher educational trajectory development. Yeah, that's the 3 key points we covered.
Okay, thank you so much. And I think there are some innovative approaches that are emphasizing student-centered learning. And I guess in our conversation with you, Professor Chen, we talked about interfacing. And you did talk about having apps that, like language apps or language teaching across the curriculum. So maybe Professor Chen, you would share some ideas with us about interfacing in terms of like interdisciplinary interfacing.
I think this is yes.
You're good.
We just discussed with this group, and yes, there's a lot of interfaces. If you find interfaces, that means there's potential for interdisciplinary collaboration. I think just a very short response.
Okay, so thank you so much, Phoebe and colleagues. And what about Wen's group? We've got Wen, we've got Hazel, we've got Edmund and Peggy from.
Okay, I'm just gonna try.
I think I'm gonna give you another mic because it doesn't work very well.
Thank you.
Because it belongs to me, so it.
Okay.
Hello, Pink. Hello. Okay.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna try, but my my group mates should be. Yeah. Can. Hello.
It doesn't work. I don't know why it doesn't work.
Is it
Cannot both good.
Maybe I'll switch it off.
You should off.
You have a go. Yeah, you now.
Hello.
Off you go.
Okay. Okay. So I'm just gonna try to summarize, and if there's anything I'm missing, my group can help or chip in any moment. So I think the key words of our discussion was impact. So I think we were trying to think of research from the impact that we can create for the community. So instead of being kind of interest oriented and only thinking about our field, especially for fresh graduates of PhD students, we tend to live in our own world. So we have learned from our seasoned researchers and decided that we should work like backwards, like from what the society needs and what the RGC is looking for. So we will look into what's favorable from the committees or panelists' point of view, and then start developing like groups, and then work from like an interdisciplinary perspective. Yeah. So that's anything you would like to add? Yes, Peggy.
Hey.
Yeah, we also talk about like methodology and research methods on the like FDS submissions. We talk about that pilot study is very important. When you have a very good research ideas, perhaps you will start from your research proposal. But from the reviewer's point of view, if you have some pilot study, you got some preliminary data, that will be also important. So we also discussed that pilot study should be very important when you start submitting your FDS submissions. And also we talk about team collaborations because if we want to generate more research outputs like journal papers, so one-man band is very difficult actually.
Yes.
So if we can team up with more like team members, maybe at CPC level or even in other universities, that would be very good start as well. Yeah, I think that's all.
I think one of our advantages in this college is that we are not big, and we are like very close together. And during my PhD period, I went to a writing boot camp, and I think it's a good idea that we write together because all we are concerned about is writing. Eventually, so we love the process, we love the grind, but eventually we still have to produce something. So maybe I would like to propose a writing group together so we could have like a weekend boot camp, writing for 5 hours straight with tea and biscuits and whatnot. I think that would be always some like meditation and mindfulness, that kind of thing. That would be my thing. So what would be your advice for us when we are like starting from low and humble?
Yes, thank you for this group, which I have also briefly discussed with. And I really like the idea of meeting society needs, going out of the comfort zones. And yes, I forgot to mention, yes, start with something pilot, which is more easily accepted as a kind of seeding your future projects. Yes, it's a very good idea. And the writing group is very important. Maybe a little bit of tips. Sometimes if you work in groups, ultimately, of course, you want to publish. So have some mutual understanding on the authorship. Yes. Yeah. Someone who's good at maybe help everyone, but on the other hand, maybe the contribution of data. So everyone have some understanding beforehand would also be good.
I think it's all about like tapping into everyone's expertise and our interests, because how we met, how Wen and I met, we met in a certain seminar, and because of that, we talked about our research areas. So I'm doing linguistics, like text analysis, genre, and something about literature. And when it's all about literature, it's about storytelling. And that's how we came about with the idea of digital storytelling. So I think this kind of little collaborations among colleagues, or simply having chats with colleagues that you know or you don't know would be very useful, very valuable. So now we would like to move forward to the chat room. And so now we have some keywords from Professor Chan.
Just type them.
And now we have 4 rooms with active members. So perhaps let's start with room 1 with Benny, Manning, and Nina. And if you'd like to say a few words, we'd like to switch on your microphone, and we'd like to hear from you.
Anytime I'm ready to say a few words.
Yes, please.
Okay, so we are in room 3 and there are 3 of us. One is Winfred Xuan, who is a linguist. And then there are 2 others. It happened that we are colleagues in the UOW College Hong Kong. So both Judy and myself, we are not in education, we are in science. So we discuss a lot with how Wilfred teach his discipline. And then the topic really changed to focus on how to enhance students' motivation and engagement in learning English. Now, the difference, we said that the difference between his discipline and ours is that when they came to post-secondary college, their science knowledge, and especially when I teach microbiology, is very, very basic. And we can, well, more easily help to engage and motivate themselves, the students. But with English, most of our students have learned English for so many years. And regrettably, our students do not like English. They do not regard English is useful for their career in the Hong Kong environment, even though we have so many international firms. So our sort of conversation is based on how to share with Winfred how we motivate our students to get interested in the subject first. And that is something that we would like Wilfred to try, because when he talked about his pedagogy, I was asking, is it just telling students what to do? Did you ever ask students to do something to identify their weakness, to identify their strength, or with peer sharing? And Wilfred told me that the students at that level find it very difficult to perform their task. To me, if you have to engage the student instead of letting the student just listen to you all the time to get them interested. So this is something that we were discussing, and we encourage Wilfred to think of research projects or tiny projects that can help him to move towards this direction. Wilfred, you want to say something, or Judy, you want to say something as well?
Thank you. Thank you, Lillian, for your sharing. I think, can you hear me? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Lillian, and also Judy's sharing. I think it's very interesting to share and to discuss with colleagues from different disciplines, and also from even from different college. I just found that Judy and also Lillian emphasized that the importance of enforcing what we call experiential learning from their subjects, and I think it's quite effective because Judy has achieved presidential awards in the past years, and also Judy just shared that she has adopted blended learning in UOW last year, and also it was quite effective, and I think it is very valuable or practical experience for us to learn some first-hand experience from how to innovate in the pedagogy in terms of for example, for language teaching or for the other subject teaching. And the second thing is that from Lillian's sharing, from UOW's experience, I think that's also quite interesting to motivate students. And also, and this becomes another big question for me to how to carry on with my career next step as academic English lecturer, because because as what we discussed just now, because students have the prior knowledge about English before, right? So, and if they come to a program, they complain that, oh, everything is, oh, and we all learn this maybe from secondary, from primary schooling or something, but then we have to repeat again. So sometimes, so we have to spare more efforts and times to make sure and to how to motivate them to become a better and more independent learner. Yeah, thank you.
So I guess to me, a research area can be the different type of pedagogy one can improve the practice of teaching English. And and I did emphasize also that if, let's say, your research shows that it can be have positive results, do not be afraid to apply it. Although your students may not like it because you change your method of teaching. So you have to be take risk, communicate with your senior management that your TLQ may go down because students do not like the change, but that is really for the long-term good of the students once they realize how the change in the practice can help them to learn much better. So that is something that I think everybody should note, that do not be afraid about your TLQ score being sort of downgraded by students because of your change. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Judy, you want to share something?
Okay. So in fact, I think you know, so as Gillian said, number one, teachers like me, you know, first try not to be afraid of the change. So, and the second thing is, trust your students. In fact, your students would also like to change, okay, to face the new challenges, you know, in this 21st century. So, I mean, the conclusion is, 1 + 1, you know, can equal more than 2, maybe 3, 4, 5, or even 10. So
11.
Yeah, 11. Yeah, 1 + 1 equals to, or maybe more than 11. So yeah, you know, I mean, especially, you know, just like the COVID-19, you know, we have to change, right? And we have to wear masks, you know, at all times when we are out. So in fact, the students, they are willing to change. Okay, try not to you know, let's all go outside the classroom, or, you know, think out of the box to change the way that we teach. Yeah, that's what I want to share. Thank you.
Thank you. So would you like to say something for the moment?
Thank you. I think this observation is quite consistent with what we have conducted in the so-called impact study of the DSE. And for the associate degree and so on, we find that differences between those going straight into the degree or undergraduate programs and English is quite a common concern. Not in terms of really standard, but generally they are, I'm not sure it's less motivated, but like Lydian's observation, I think, which is very valid. But on the other hand, what I learned from applied learning particularly, I think, again, very consistent findings. We are tracing students learning, applied learning, even when they graduate and enter tertiary institutions. They find that the interest, the interest in that actually motivate them to learn languages, because they know that if they learn languages well, that actually help them
learn the subject.
So I think maybe this would be a kind of reference for the student. I mean, for the pedagogical practices and so on and so forth.
Agreed. So,
so far what I remember,
as like English lecturers ourselves, I think it would be also good, apart from having the expertise in the subject knowledge, which is English teaching, we also need to look into like cognitive aspects or psychological aspects of learning. So that's why you also recommended the book about how we learn, right?
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, and of course, changes involve a lot of like processes of like experiencing pain of different sorts. And I think as long as the changes are good and for the good of students or for the well-being of our colleagues, I think it's worthwhile. So far, so good. And I think we still have a bit of time, and we have 2 more groups, I think. If you'd like to say something, you could turn on your mic anytime, and perhaps we could wait for a couple of seconds to see whether you would like to add something. Other groups. And Professor Chen, if we would like to say, ask you questions,
Yes,
if we are not going to further share our ideas
please,
now,
please.
so we can contact
Yeah,
you,
of
so
course.
we can drop you an email.
Yeah, you're very welcome to contact me. And I promise that I will edit the PowerPoint a little bit,
Okay.
right? And then Eric can share with you. But I think most probably it's not uploaded because I'm still writing the paper.
Okay.
I mean, with my colleagues and so on. And then there are also schools there. And I also promise that if you like to have a session on the interdisciplinary perspectives, I'm very happy to do so, because it's actually one of the sessions that I give to the adult students.
Okay, this means we are going to meet you again.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Okay,
You don't find it boring.
Yeah, we'll definitely look for opportunities to work with you. So I guess it's good for now. So would you like to wrap up the session?
Yeah.
Please.
Yes, thank you, Eric. I think this is a very enjoyable session for me, and I keep learning from you, and some of your sharing is very inspiring, and you're very passionate, and it's very promising. And like the title of this talk, you are actually opening up your research opportunities and opportunities for transfer. I see a lot of potential, and potentials that have uniqueness that not all institutions will have. So this is the landscape. You're contributing to a very beautiful Hong Kong education landscape, from the tradition to the future. I think it's very promising. So we are part of the community. I feel that I'm still a member of the community, no matter what role I am. So we're just friends here. So let's keep in contact. So have a good weekend.
Thank you, Professor Chan. Thank you. So I hope you all have enjoyed the workshop. And now perhaps it's a little bit of a promotion time. So perhaps we could switch the slides to the very page. So on the 18th of August, next Wednesday at 3 p.m., so we are going to organize an online workshop titled Using Digital Collaboration Tools to Teach Design Thinking. So we've got Dr. Chris Yin with us again from SEHS. So you can find the details in our previous email invitations. So I'm sure there are still a few seats, right? Okay, so we can still sign up for that. Thank you. And before you leave, we would like to invite you to fill in a feedback form for our future improvement. So if you are here, you may scan this QR code on the screen, or if you are online, of course, you can still scan the QR code here, or you may want to find the hyperlink in the chat box. So it will take a couple of minutes.